So, welcome, folks. Welcome to the Fully Remote Talk Show. My name is Arjun, and I'm the host of the Fully Remote Talk Show for leaders who are adapting their style to a remote-first world. Today, we are on episode 9, even though that says episode 8 there, and we are talking about interviewing remote-first engineering talent. This is a huge topic. Everybody, when they thought that the remote world opened up, there is a big global talent pool that we can tap on, but I really don't know a single person who is not hiring for engineers right now. It's just everybody in my LinkedIn has the hiring tab, and like engineering talent is one of the hardest to come by. And while the battle for this talent is so crazy right now, how do we stay ahead? How do we go a step ahead and like get the good talent? Is it just throwing more money at the problem, or should we just lower our bar, include more training? What should we do? And this is on top of everybody's mind. And thankfully for us, we have an expert among us, and I am going to super excitedly bring up on stage Vivek. Vivek, welcome to the show. We are super excited to have you. For folks that don't know Vivek, he is veteran in the engineering leadership. He's got over 20 years of experience right now being an engineering leader, working at Amazon, and as a result of right now working at Meta/Facebook. But beyond all that, he is a founder of SDE Skills, which is a community which trains engineers to do their best in like technical interviews. And he's helped, or he and his team has of people at SDE Skills have helped more than hundreds, maybe thousands even, to bring their best in their technical interview. And that is exciting. Like so much of mock interviews and seminars and like meetups that he has conducted in this space. And very excited to have Vivek over here. Vivek, welcome on board.
Awesome. Thank you. Just one quick check. Like, I'm not sure if is my video all right? Because I'm not sure if it's freezing.
No, we are doing really well. In case if it does have like anything to do with freezing, the background blur sometimes does that. So feel free to turn that off, and sometimes it might actually like help.
That could be it. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's better.
We see you fine. I see you fine, so it's all good from my
end. Good. Let's get going on that one. So just wanted to do a quick plug. So I've been a part of this show for a couple of iterations now, and it's always fun. I know it's like fast-paced, quick, and super excited. So when Arjun was saying like, hey, do you want to talk about the hiring? And I'm like, absolutely. That is something I've been enjoying doing over many years now. SDE Skills, for what it's worth, was started in 2010 and it's a 501c3 nonprofit and community with over 10,000 members. It's a Discord group practicing lead code questions, system design questions, and whatnot. So feel free to join. Feel free to look it up. And yeah, one of the things that we've been very bad at is actually tracking how many success stories we've had. Anecdotally, I think it is probably in the 4 digits, as you said, but don't know. More likely than that, it's from there. But yeah, super excited to be here and happy to chat about like remote hiring.
Perfect. This is great. I think we have a ton of questions that I want to ask you, and then like I'm pretty sure everybody else over here wants to jump in and ask questions as well. But as we do in the show all the time, we check in with who is over here. And with that, we want a one-word answer question that we ask. And this time the question is that if you were not in the tech world, what job would you be doing? I know that this crowd is completely a tech crowd, but I want to know that if you were not here, what job would you be doing? And I want to have you type that answer on that. For folks who don't know, we are on the Zinc platform, which is a highly interactive platform where we try to bring audience to be participating into these events rather than just watching as if they're watching a video. We love audience participation over here. So take a moment to type it over there, and in about 10-15 seconds, I will show what everybody else has typed. And this is anonymous. We don't know who typed what, but we would see the word cloud of what everybody said. Welcome, folks, for those of you who've joined since I see Uday, I see Kevin, M, Ramamurthy, Ankit. Welcome, everybody. Type in that one word. If you were not in the tech world today, what job would you be doing? And in about 5 seconds, you're going to see the answer. Whew. Teacher. Looks like teacher is a big center spot over there in terms of number of people who probably typed that. Professor, teaching, elephant hairstylist. I want to meet that person, whoever that was. Twitch streamer, Pizzaiola. I don't know how to say that. Interior designer, athlete, sound engineer, actor, doctor, painter. Nice. I think we have a lot of inner talent among people over here. Please channel your inner questioning person, whoever that persona is for this show. We'd love to hear about from all of you folks. With that, I'd love to jump into like the question and answer mode over here. Again, Vivek, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions over here, but if anybody else thinks that they have a question, feel free to raise your hands and come up on stage and ask the question. The main topic, right? Like interviewing, especially like remote hiring and interviewing is slightly different from how people have been used to doing hiring. And I want to like double click on just the interviewing aspect. And I kind of am thinking about it from a sort of three things, right? Like what happens before an interview, during the interview, and like what happens after the interview. And then let's just start from before, right? Like I know the job descriptions and like writing good JDs is one of the biggest part of successfully hiring interviewers. What is your thoughts on like the things that we should be doing, especially when it comes to remote hiring?
So I think that in general, starting the hiring pipeline as such is it does start from a good job description. And I remember when I started at Amazon and I was just starting to hire, one of the things that we did was there was this whole rush of writing creative job descriptions. And it'll be something completely arbitrary, bizarre. It's not this boring, like we are looking for a software engineer to do this. It'll be something completely supposed to add some excitement to the club, which is around, oh, you're planting the seeds of innovation, and it was like all flowery words and whatnot. I don't know if it made any difference or not, but the whole point was that it actually makes the person pause and read and think about what's going on, right? So that was like the point there. Now, just looking at it in line with the theme of what you're looking at, I don't know if there's anything specific or particular that I would do for a remote friendly job description per se. I think the key difference I see is that maybe the only thing I can think of is actually be very explicit about it, that you are a remote friendly team. And I'd like to also challenge people. Like, I've done this once or twice so far, is that I lead a sentence for saying that I don't want to build a remote friendly team. I pause for dramatic effect, and then I say I want to build a remote first team. The key difference being you don't want to retrofit your process to support remote friendliness. Rather, what you want to do is actually build your process that accommodates the remoteness as is, which means more async meetings, which means like you're actually, you figure out how you're interacting with people. Keep in mind time zones, keep in mind availability, and a whole bunch of other items. Again, not to say that these things don't matter for an in-person team as well, right? All of these things mean the same. Like, why have meetings when you can probably do it async better as well? So the same concepts apply, but they're just more amplified now. So back to the conversation is that, so at Meta, what happens is we're not doing a lot of external hiring. The hiring is already taken care of by the recruiting team. And then they go into a boot camping process, and the engineers come in, and as managers, we reach out to the boot campers. So it's kind of similar to reaching out how you do job descriptions and whatnot, or a LinkedIn cold calling equivalent. But it really helps to actually talk about this is my team is actually remote friendly. Here is why it's remote friendly. This is what we do. And here is like, and again, proof points around, I already have 3 engineers on my team who are remote actually helps. So just talking about why you're building a remote friendly team is absolutely important. So just starting with job description, be very upfront about it. I think at least for now, but in the future, I'm actually anticipating that you probably have to call out if you're not remote friendly, because the remote friendliness is going to become the norm. That's my guess.
Makes a ton of sense. Okay, so I love the distinction between the remote friendly and remote first, and how job descriptions are job descriptions and they stay pretty much the same. What about like the whole screening process, right? Like I think one thing that we've noticed in this global talent pool is there is a lot more people who are claiming to be engineers that are interested, but like end up not being a good fit, and it's a lot of waste of time. And so what kind of screening processes does it make sense to do? And again, like I want to just like briefly touch upon the idea of like removing bias when it comes to this as well, right? Like, so just talk to me about it, like a couple minutes on that part.
Sure. I think the key part here is that there is definitely like a mismatch between demand and supply, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of weird because there's a lot of supply and a lot of demand, and it's just that they don't seem to match, or they don't seem to align, and like, people are just applying to jobs that they don't qualify, in the hope that, may all I'm looking for is an opportunity. On the other hand, there have been many cases where I see where people are like looking for position, filling a position. Like if I look at any of the top companies, you would find that they have like hundreds of openings or thousands of openings, and even smaller companies have openings for months to end,
Mm-hmm.
right? They've not have filled that up. So I think what I do essentially is a couple of things. So one is, I'm a little anti screening to a large extent. Like, and I want to make sure that people get FaceTime. Uh, the mechanism of like at least getting, I don't know how scalable that process actually works, but what I have seen is that human connection as early as you can get to makes a huge difference in the hiring process. And I know recruiters try to do that, I know systems try to do that, but like one thing that I saw was a negative trend back when I was at Amazon, was that the recruiters would actually just quickly send out like, oh, here's an online assessment, go take it and come back. And they would very quickly do that, but at the same time they wouldn't even talk to the person. And in a few
Mm-hmm.
cases where I know they don't do that well on a standardized online assessment, but they do very well in like a real job setting, they do very well in a phone interview and things like that. I've actually gotten them through the process by talking to the hiring manager, talking to the recruiter, and then getting them set up an exception process. But that's like, it's annoying, it just doesn't make any sense. And maybe a company which is big and has going through so many people, they can probably afford to lose some of these folks, but I don't think so. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a tough world, so you don't want to lose talent by just like, sticking to practice which is not flexible. So my quick thing here is, your screening process has to be super super lightweight, and then get people connected to people. At the end of the day, that's where that's kind of what we're trying to get to, and especially in the remote world. If your company is trying to be very passive in the recruiting process and engages very late, that probably also reflects on how they'll be treating the employees once they join. So I wouldn't be very happy joining a company which doesn't actually have a screening process.
Got it. Wow, this is pretty big. I mean, like, it's like the screener question slash interview, or like the take homes are like, like some sort of staple. And I'm pretty sure like people in the audience will have like thoughts about it. And I want to like bring more people and like have them share their thoughts. But let me just, like throw up like a quick activity while we go move away from like, what happens before the interview to like what really happens during the interview over here. I want to just like throw an activity over here and ask folks for their thoughts. What have you hated the most about an interview? I mean, you have probably a leader who has, as an interviewer, you had like several thoughts about it. Go ahead and like start writing down what you think about it on either of these columns, whether as a candidate or as an interviewer. What do you hate like really about a technical interview? And if you have any choice stories that you think you want to share, feel free to like raise your hands and then we can bring you up on stage. Or if you want to quickly react to what Vivek said last about screener and we want to talk about that, this is also a good chance to just come up on stage while everybody else is typing their thoughts.
I like that. No show, no show, no show.
Wow.
Yes.
Says a
Lack of
lot about this.
preparation, underprepared candidate, too many rounds, no real world questions. By the way, Arjun, do you know why manhole covers are round?
Manhole. Oh my God.
Do
I
you know
have
why?
been. I, what is the answer? Do I tell the one where which I know, which I have learned from somebody telling me that like then they actually don't fall inside because they're round, or is there like a more sophisticated answer that I should have known about this?
Well, apparently it's easy to roll it. It's manhole covers are heavy, right? So
Oh, there
apparently it's
you
easier
go.
to roll that too. So that's like a different answer, which I mean, those are the two answers I've heard. One is there's no way you can actually flip it around or do something and shove it inside the hole.
Yeah.
which if it's a rectangle or something, you can probably push it down the diagonal and you can drop it in. So that's like supposed to be that. The yeah, a lot of the questions, unfortunately, at interviews, that is a big issue because the companies are trying to scale the process, and they try to use standardized ways of assessing candidates without like revealing or leaking that question to the internet
Right.
or to the public. So it becomes hard. So that's why I was like reacting to too many rounds and no real world questions or problems.
Yeah. I think by being an experienced interviewer is mostly just like knowing all these standard questions and then being able to answer it is what it is. And any amount of experience is just like knowing good interview answers, I suppose. This
I'd
is
like
a
to
ton
add
of
one more, like two more comments here, right? Already there. One is that two people have at least pointed out that the problem statements are usually vague and they're not
Mhm.
very clear, and interviews are not very specific about what they're actually looking for. And it may actually be, depending on if you're a junior candidate, yes, it should be a lot more clearer. But sometimes the interview actually expects you to drive and seek clarity. Like seldom in real world you will have problems like neatly laid out for you, so the ability to deal with ambiguity is something that is expected. So it is quite possible that you may misinterpret that as the interviewer not knowing what they're doing. But I think it's like they know exactly what they're looking for, and they're actually setting the stage up with like an open-ended statement and letting you drive the show. So just be mindful of that. I know no wrong answers, because this is exactly what you hear the most. So I'm not here to say
right.
you shouldn't hit that, but sometimes it's probably by design. But go ahead, Arjun.
No, this is super helpful, and I think I really like some of these answers over here, or some of these comments that I am seeing over here. I'm glad that like we've captured this right now, but I want to like tag on that exact answer that you just said about like how things are different for senior versus junior, and just go back to like interviewing and like maybe ask like the main question here, right? Is like coding interviews are the thing, and like you probably have been in this world where like coding is like the main form that we're assessing people. Is that here to stay, and is that evolving, is that changing, especially for like senior engineers who probably are thinking that like a coding challenge is not like the main way to assess them? And like what is your thoughts on that, and like how are things changing in the world right now?
Interesting choice. Again, my experience is fairly limited in that sense that I had worked at Amazon, Meta, and I'm also interacting mostly with in SDA skills people who are actually trying to get into like a Google or similar type companies. So
Got it.
there seems to be like bias for these lead code style questions, or these questions which are more problem centric, in the sense that they're very algorithmic or data structure algorithm based, and I've seen that. I don't think it's gonna go away just like that, because I think the what you need to think about is like, why are these questions there in the first place, and what signals is it actually providing? If decompose it and then think of like at the end of the day, and this is what we talk about that in SD skills very often as well, is that an interview process actually breaks down into four things. First is your requirements clarification. There is actually ambiguity in terms of what is given, what are the inputs, and whatnot. And the second phase is like problem solving, where you're actually trying to solve the problem. Like forget technology, forget everything else, just solve it. And that's where you kind of choose the right data structure, choose the right algorithm and whatnot. And then the third step is like translating that to code. And the fourth step is verifying that if your code, did you actually end up solving the problem? These are the four steps. You just go through them in motion. It's like almost like muscle memory of sorts. You keep going through that, and then you are successful in pretty much most interviews if you follow the steps and follow the process. Now, the thing is that if I've looked at assessment rubrics that Amazon has, that Meta has, and a few other companies have as well, and I actually helped create that for one of the assessment companies as well a couple of years ago. And the mechanics, it's pretty simple. It's exactly these four things. Like, did the person just jump into straight into coding, making assumptions? Because if so, probably they'll do that in a real world as well. Like when I give them a problem statement, they wouldn't think through, and they'll probably jump into solving whatever they want to solve, which is probably not right. And then the next thing is like problem solving versus coding. Like, are they confusing themselves and putting the cart before the horse and trying to think in terms of technology and code, as opposed to thinking in terms of like the solution itself and whatnot? And are they even testing their system? So these are the four steps. Every rubric that I have seen has like flavors of these four things, and essentially you're just checking these four boxes, and that's about it. Now, if there's a good way to check these four boxes without going through a take-home test or anything, that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, I haven't found a mechanism that works, that scales, and that is actually susceptible to like cheating. Like if I could just give you these 4 questions, and if you could check them and give them back to me, that would be fantastic. But I don't think it works that way. So anyway, so that's my
Got
question.
it.
I think it's here to stay. Short answer.
Makes a ton of sense. Again, folks, I know that like a bunch of you are enjoying this and are reacting to it. I know that Jay wants to ask a question. I'm going to bring him up on stage. Jay.
Yeah. So you just mentioned about the take home, and that kind of sparked this question. Uh, is there like how do we? I mean, is that it feels like to me take home is the way I can kind of assess, go a bit deeper, give them more real world problems, and have them solve that. But it's generally perceived. There's been a I guess in as sort of the pandemic's evolving and more of these interviews are happening, a generic sort of pushback against take homes is sort of being perceived among candidates where like you're wasting my time or I'm having to spend so much time to do these things. What? How do you approach that? Like I do want to do take homes, and maybe the answer is that that's your bar. You got to go through it. If not, that candidate is not worth it. Maybe I don't know. But what's the thinking around that? Because I do think they're important, but then some candidates who are good candidates are good nuggets of gold that I might actually miss out. What's the thought on that? How do we approach this?
I have a slightly different perspective here on that also. So first of all, like take home as such is it's definitely a big loop and a big hurdle, and there is no guarantee that I'm going to get anything out of it, right? As a candidate, so I can easily see why there's a hesitance there, and it just seems like I have to jump through a lot of hoops before I can do something. As is the 4 5 hour interviews grueling. This seems like a little bit bizarre. I'm trying to equate this to the Meta's boot camping process. So in boot camping process, what happens is that you're already hired. So there is no, you're not really, you're not attending for a job. You're not getting a job after this thing. But you're doing team matching, in which case you're actually sitting with multiple teams. You spend almost a week with every team, like 3 or 4 teams, and then you pick which team you want to sit with. This gives you a much, much better sense of what the team is working on and everything else and whatnot. I can easily see how a take-home test or like a little bit more involved conversation with the like making them attend your stand-up or your whatever, like team meeting would help. But the problem is that I can't see this process scale. Like it works because for boot camping it totally works. I can see it, and I really appreciate and understand how it helps me as a manager assess the strengths and weaknesses of the person, and it also helps them get a better feel because they get to spend more time with me. But on the other hand, in an interview process, it just seems too expensive, and I'm not sure if there is a better way to do the same thing, in the sense that like what I have seen work slightly better is actually making people explain what they have done in greater level of detail. It's a much harder skill to have. Like you can't scale on the interviewer side with this one. But if I were to spend like an hour with you and making you explain the product that you have built over many years, and I can go to n levels of detail and make you explain that, and you're able to hold up to that level of scrutiny without actually going into all the tech jargon and mumbo jumbo, then I think you're probably way better. Giving you a problem to solve may work the same way. I think so. My thing is that I don't think you have an alternative. Unfortunately, the take homes are the easiest ways to assess, and it's the easiest way to scale. If you lose out on people, you lose out on people. But if you have the capability to, then run the exception process for handful of candidates where you can probably do the deep dive, like maybe 1 or 2 people, like maybe the CEO or the CTO or your principal engineer can run that for those 5 6 candidates that you really care about.
Thanks.
I love it.
Thank you.
This is awesome, and I think, I had a suspicion that this interview is going to go out of time, this show, and like I clearly see that that's going to happen, and I think like I'm going to have to bring Vivek for a part 2, but I still think that like I'm going to extend this by like a 10 minute and see whether we can squeeze in a few more questions and get like some more nuggets of this awesome thing that's going on right now. And I'm seeing some thumbs up, which I'm hoping means that like people are excited to stay back and like hear more on this. And so again, like, going back to one of the questions about what happens during an interview, are things slightly different right now where you're assessing people for a remote fit, which means that like you're working with somebody who is like potentially across different time zones, across like the world, have a different, forget meeting culture, just like real culture itself. And like now things are like different. And again, like from bigger companies, you probably have done remote hiring a lot, but like from what you're talking about from the early stage startups or like the startup front, how should somebody as a leader assess for a fit in this for like a general fit outside of just technical capabilities?
I think a few things come to mind. The key difference that I see between remote hiring versus like a typical interview where they're in your office or you're having a conversation with them, I think you are missing out on a lot of body language cues, which were like much easier to assess and whatnot. So I think make sure that you're focusing on building that connection. It's much harder over a Zoom call or a video call or whatever you want to talk about that. Right? It becomes much different, much impersonal. I think video is adding a color to it, which was not there before. Earlier it was just phones, but now with the video, with the interactions and all that, it makes sense. So that's one. The second thing is environment it is a little different. Like when people are coming into office for the interview, they are in that game, they have the game face on, they know that they need to come in and perform, so it's much easier. Whereas when you're doing a remote interview, you're at home on a video call, you could have your child crying in the background, or you could have something else going on, or you were just in something 5 minutes ago, and the context which is actually happening there. So as a manager, as a hiring manager, I think the one thing I would actually advise is build empathy and make sure that you're connecting with the person as a person, and then jumping into this assessment model. Like don't start with assessment first. And another massive change of view is that when you're hiring, hiring is an interaction, right? So when you're hiring, are you buying or are you selling? What do you do? Like, it's like most people go with the buyer's mindset and saying like, I'm buying, I have this job, you need that job, and you have to meet all these conditions, right? And that kind of works for junior maybe folks, and it also probably works if you are in a like prime position or something like that. But even big companies, you got to be having a seller's mindset. You have to be selling the position. You ought to be, saying like, I'm grateful for you taking the time to interview with this company or with us. I'm so glad that you're talking to me at this point. I know you have tons of choices. You don't have to do this. And I mean, that's you don't have to say all of this, but that should be your attitude to start with. And that makes a huge difference. And then you're trying to do the connection between why we are a good fit for you. And that should be an undercurrent in the entire conversation. The more you do that, the more successful you will be. And I think that's where the empathy and the seller's mindset would be like top two in my mind.
This is gold. I mean, I guess like the idea that you got to have a seller's mindset when it comes to like hiring. You are not the person who is like running a show over here and like somebody's here to jump through the hoops, but you are literally like selling it to them in every way. And that actually like changes the attitude about like how you structure your interview and how you get them through this process. Makes a ton of sense. Empathy, again, makes a ton of sense in a lot of places, including interviews. This is great. I have another question, but I'm going to actually like see if we, instead of probably people like lifting their hands, that this would work, where if people are interested in like typing a question and like want to hear an answer for that, like would you be asking that question on that chat box over there and we can bring that question up on stage? Or if you think it's a very sensitive question, that you can ask it anonymously as well in the forum on the right. So feel free to type your questions. And while we're at it, and like, let's move to like more of what happens like after the interview, right? I know that like there is just so much that happens during the interview that I didn't get to, which I hope to get in part two perhaps, but to just get completion over here, right? The decision-making process. Again, like I want to double click on the idea that like, is this concerns about like a remote hired person, if they're going to be a good fit for us in terms of how do we know that they're doing their jobs, and like, all those concerns that come up for somebody who is hiring for a remote engineer. How do you factor that into your decision-making process, and should you even like think about it?
I don't think it matters. I mean, I don't think the fact that a person is remote or not should matter. I think at least the positions that I have been hiring for and the positions that I'm looking at are essentially what I call as like they're knowledge workers. And this is not one of those things. It's not like hourly work or something where I need to keep track of what they're doing. And if I don't keep track of them, they'll goof off or something and whatnot. We're looking at people who are they should be self-managed. If they can get the job done faster, it's up to them. And we're talking about like setting goals and expectations and whatnot. So the process should evolve to account for this, and it shouldn't matter in terms of in terms of whether they're remote or not. I mean, there are certain things that makes it harder. Like it's a remote engineering manager, for example, is a little difficult because can you do that? Have you done that before? I may ask a few questions on those areas to make sure that they can do their job remotely and they've done that, or they at least have the frameworks to do that, or they have the ways to learn that. That'll be my worry. But otherwise, I don't think it matters. And I think many companies have gone 100% remote, and they're with this pandemic, and we have proven that we can operate 100% remote in many
Nice.
many companies. So now it's a question of, do you want to go back to your old ways, or do you want to just like adopt the hybrid and
This is nice.
support like a mixed culture? And that works. We have a few questions, looks like.
Yeah, we have a few questions lined up over here. I want to bring Hendra. Hendra, your question.
Hi, Vivek. Thank you for like the sessions. It's really helpful. So my question is like, do you have any like best practice on identifying the cultural fit during the interview?
I don't like that word, but let's go with that. So
there's, I think like the question that Bharat's asking there also seems like to be touching on that behavioral interviews, deciding.
So the thing that I look at, and I've seen this phrased in so many different ways. It's like, would I like to have beer with this person, or can I hang out with them, or whatnot, whatever else. And the thing that the reason why I don't like it as such is that it's kind of that like tech has always had this undercurrent of people have this, it's like a culture, it's like a cult where a group of people, they only hire people amongst themselves and don't really prefer diverse thoughts and things like that. So that's why I don't like the word culture fit as such. But I think the mechanism, the way to think about it is that, and I like Amazon's leadership principles there. And the focus there is essentially, you embody these 14 leadership, now 16 leadership principles, then you will be successful because the entire company is speaking the same language, they're speaking the same thing. Like, when we say ownership, this is what we mean. And all of that. Now you are able to sustain, or you're able to demonstrate that you are able to adopt those cultural values, then you're a culture fit. But it can be misused, and I don't want that. I don't want people to be abusing that term to mean that I don't like you because I don't know, whatever. And then I'm saying it's not a culture fit. That's not the right way of using it. So I actually like Amazon's style of behavioral interviewing, where they spend a lot of time, they go in depth. Like if you look at the actual interviews itself, almost 50% of the time in the interviews is towards behavior interviewing. Like every interview has behavior interviewing, and every interviewer covers 2 or 3 behavioral aspects of it. And that's valued a lot more than the technical aspects of it. Because if you're aligned from that perspective, like if you're thinking about the same thing, like technology wise, that's just skill you can acquire. It's much easier to acquire those. And so that would be my thought. I think that's how I would assess cultural fit, if you want to call it that.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Hendra, for that question. I think this is a very important distinction. Culture fit has have a negative rap in terms of like the bro culture being the culture fit, and like, are you like me is what people have like thought about as culture fit. But I love the idea of like, instead of rephrasing that as like, these are our principles by which we work over here, and are you going to succeed if you demonstrate these? And like, that's actually a better way to think about it. And I suppose you already kind of answered this question, but I just want to like bring that and see if you wanted to add color to that. Does behavioral interviews decide the decision of the levels as much as the technical rounds? And I think you kind of answered it, but do you want to just quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a different nuance in the sense that in technical rounds, we're trying to assess more or less your technical skills. Like, are you able to design complicated systems, like what I expect from senior engineers? Are you able to code appropriately like a junior engineer and whatever, right? So if you fail certain technical rounds, that actually limits your ability to be hired as a staff engineer or a principal engineer if your technical rounds don't go as well in some cases. I mean, if you don't do the coding well, you probably won't get the offer. And the same metric also applies for behavioral interviewing. Typically at behavioral interviews, the expectation from the engineer or from the manager or from the candidate as such is that you will be performing in a level appropriate manner. So if your answers are more junior, and typically the way you think of it is that as you grow up in the value chain, you're more tactical, more strategic versus tactical. Like, you'll be a lot more tactics focused when you're junior, you're a lot more strategy focused and long range focused when you're senior. Your behavioral interview answers actually reflect that. So when someone asks you a question about, give me the hardest challenge you faced, and you talk about like a Git commit that you were struggling with and you had to figure out how to bisect it and whatnot, sounds more junior-esque than when you're talking about like, here's this massive customer problem and I had to deal with this particular scenario and whatever else. And that actually is the metric there. So I don't think it's one is better than the other, but they're just adding the color in a different way. Like you could be an amazing technologist, like principal like and staff like, but if your behavioral aspects are junior like, then you'll probably get that junior role. And sometimes the company may look the other way and say that, you know what, maybe it's a bad interview, maybe we are getting mixed signals, it's okay. So it's a combination. It's never black or white.
Awesome. And I'm going to take one last question from Jay before we move on to like one last, the money question for us. Jay, what's the question? You're muted, Jay.
So in terms of, I guess like you talked about a bunch of stuff which are really good points, right? And they're applicable for whether they are like larger companies or smaller companies. But I'm kind of curious, I want to sort of speak on the spot of like, how does it apply to how would this apply to a company like, say, for example, Zinc, right? We are a super early startup, or there may be other people in the audience who have or in a similar boat. And when we approach this problem, do we go back and codify these levels, or do we figure out what our exact like rubrics are? Because we are kind of like learning as we are going, and it's not clear to us whether it makes sense to go and build that entire rubric, the entire leveling strategy, and then start starting candidates, because candidates are hard to come by. Talent is tough, and we got to hire. We have so much to do. How would we trade this off, like with some flexibility around, like, you know what, we got to hire this person. It's not clear to us what level he or she is going to be slotting in, but we know that they're a good fit, but we don't have a rubric, right? Like, is it important to go and no, that's the wrong answer. We got to go, come back, codify this thing, and then come back and do this again? Or should we approach it in a more flexible manner as an early stage company as we are?
So I love the question, and I'm probably quite unqualified to answer some parts of it because I've only been in relatively larger-ish companies. But that said, here's my thought, and I can share where my perspective is. I think when it's a smaller company, you need to start thinking about why do you need the levels in the first place. I think the level is just a mechanism of setting expectations. So when I'm talking to a level 1 engineer or a level 2 engineer or level 3 engineer, I know what to expect from them, and that becomes a starting point for the conversations. And then I have level 3s perform like level 4s, and level 3s perform like a bad level 3 or 2, and I know how to adjust accordingly. And that becomes easier for me when I'm doing this, and it's more of a numbers game at that point for larger companies. So I don't think it's as relevant at a smaller company, which is why I have also seen smaller companies like, you get the title you want to call yourself like the grandmaster of coding, like that's it, that's your title, right? And it doesn't matter what level actually is. I think compensation matters a lot more at that point of time, because you want to make sure that you're appropriately compensated. But then I think there are a few things where you want to be careful about would be things like giving someone like a VP of engineering title, or giving someone like a CTO title and things like that, because those are sometimes irreversible and they may not actually grow. The company may grow faster than them, and then you will actually be left with a sticky mess at a later point of time. So hiring someone, and I would not waste the time on codifying the levels, but actually focus on what kind of behaviors I want them to demonstrate at this point of time, and then go hire. If they don't demonstrate those behaviors and I'm still fine hiring them for a different role, which is more junior, hire them. Title shouldn't matter, level shouldn't matter. At least that's my take. I mean, I'm unqualified. I will qualify my statement with that.
That's a valuable insight. Thank you.
Super helpful again. I have a ton of questions that I had planned around, like, compensation. We touched upon it, like bias, negotiation, like everything around it. But I think we're running out of time over here, and I want to respect everybody's time here. And I move on to what I would say is like one of the biggest takeaway questions over here is how to stay ahead in this battle for good engineering talent. And I think like, what is like that nugget of secret that you can share that we can use to stay ahead over here? And I not only want to hear from Vivek, though Vivek is probably most qualified to tell us about this, but feel free to raise hand and then like come in and share your secret with us. And as a community, we become better at hiring engineering talent.
So I'll wait for like 2 seconds to see any hands up.
No, but you go first, Vivek, so we can we'll wait for others to show up.
Fantastic. So I think my number one trick in this engineering hiring as such is like essentially networking is still the game. That still rules. And the thing that I think will be number one, and it's helped me a lot, is that when I actually have a conversation with anyone in my network, in my social network, and I think I field about almost like more than a call a week, and I've been doing that for the last like 10 years now. and I have conversations. I talk to them about their personal situation, what's going on. It doesn't matter what they're battling with. In trying to help people almost in a selfless way, it just comes back to reward you in different ways. I think you build a social quotient, you build a reputation, the network actually helps. I think I started SDA skills like with a very selfish motive of trying to increase the talent pool for my team at Amazon. Like I was just became a new manager, couldn't hire anything, and I started SDA skills, and now it's kind of like ballooned into this big initiative, and I'm talking to so many people. I'm not even looking to hire those folks, right? The help is actually almost altruistic to some extent. But a lot of people from SDA skills have come and joined Meta, come and joined Amazon. They do come and reach out to me. I think I have at least 3 people that in my near circle whom I've hired through this in the last 6 months. So I think it does help. And I mean, what goes around comes around. So spread the positive vibes and keep helping, and it'll just work. So that's my trick. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's a get rich slow scheme. So it takes forever to build this. So that's my trick.
I love that. I definitely want to hear from a couple more other people in case if anyone wants to raise hands and come in over here. But just that idea of like, I logged into LinkedIn 6 months later to post I am hiring, and like just hoping that my social network pays off is just literally not what is going to work. This is like, you have to put in the effort, build that what you call as like the hiring brand that you are, and over time it actually like pays rewards. Love that answer. I don't see anybody else having great tips about this. But maybe what I would do is like start wrapping up things over here, and like people seem like they're more comfortable typing in this crowd than like coming up and like talking. So I'll come to the stage where like, it's like we can start winding down over here. But before everybody heads off, like just feel free to write what your top takeaway from today was in that list that you see on the right over there. And if you thought that there is a tip that you have to make us better at hiring engineering talent, feel free to add that over there as well. This has been great having all of you folks, but like I want to thank like Vivek for spending the time and sharing all these nuggets of information. This is super helpful, and I think I'm gonna definitely schedule a round 2 of this with all these other questions that I have. But for today, thanks so much, Vivek.
All right, awesome.
Yeah. I'm going to stay back over here for a little bit more and like, chat with whoever wants to stay back and like talk any offline stuff as well, or any other ways that we can improve the talk show, any topics that are of interest to you that we should be talking in this talk show, if it's specific to remote first or even engineering or even hiring. Please stay back and share your thoughts.
Looks like folks are quiet today. They want to chat. They want to type, not chat, not talk.
I just wanted to follow up on something you said, Vivek, about like the networking in the long game, and it's like how accurate that is, and how I've been like missing that for so long. I have a friend actually, like who was a successful like co-founder across a couple of companies, and then like what he does is he does a reset where he does this gig of he founds a company, and he's had like a couple of successes, and then like after it's done, he takes a break and then joins the company as an engineer, like literally joins the company as mid-level engineer or whatnot, not to like just go earn money, but to basically like network with younger folks. Like he literally wants to go work with the younger folks because he then gets to be in that mindset and actually like broaden his network base in the talent that he might want to hire in his next startup. And it's a really super long game. And I was like really impressed when he told me about that. And I was like, okay, I stand no chance at recruiting at this point. Like you've been playing the game for years, and I'm here like trying to post a LinkedIn job.
Yep.
No, I think this is the whole like, I think this is true with like selling. This is true with selling. I mean, recruiting is in some form selling, right? Like, so you are you need to build that brand, and brand building takes time. So yeah. Super helpful. I see Asta and Ro over here. Do you folks have any other thoughts that you want to share? How was this show for you? Oh, I hope they're still there. Okay, they are thumbs up, I suppose. It's good. I appreciate that. Like, you're probably in a place where you're not able to talk at this point of time, and I completely appreciate it. Thank you so much for attending the show, and I think this has been super helpful.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here.
All right, Rick. I think we definitely should like schedule one thing. I'm serious. If you are available next week, same time, I want to just do like a part 2 of it, like back to back. Is your let me know.
Next week is a little tight, so let's do the week after.
Yeah. Okay. I'll follow up offline and like let's pick it up for a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah, makes sense. All right.
Awesome,
Nice meeting all of you. Thank you so much for having me here.
All right. Have a great one. See ya.
Yeah.